to the I Love CVille Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. A pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille Network, a show that airs literally on every social media platform known to mankind. In fact, 80 different social media pages are currently simultaneously broadcasting this show as we speak. A lot we're going to cover on today's show, including breaking news of significant proportions for Charlottesville, Virginia. Breaking news that's going to impact the University of Virginia, the University of Virginia student body, and locals and tourists alike. We're going to lead with that in about 30 seconds. I'm also going to offer more follow-up on the murder on the downtown mall, a murder that's scared and spooked much of this community. I have follow-up details for you, the viewer and listener. Lastly, we're going to close the show with additional breaking news. And the additional breaking news we're going to offer is from Boyd Tinsley, the former band member of the Dave Matthews Band. A fiddle player of talented proportions who has certainly had a fall from grace. A lot we're going to cover on today's show. The viewer and listener, can participate in the discussion with thoughts, comments, questions, ideas, and perspective. We're going to lead the show with something that undoubtedly will be on television, radio, and print. So here goes. Raising Cane's, a big box brand with more than 600 locations across the United States of America, has signed a lease to replace Sheetz on the University of Virginia corner. Currently, Raising Cane's plans to open in early to mid 2023 if permitting is approved. The expectation for the grand opening is early to mid next year if their permitting is approved. The lease has been signed. This location was formerly home to the Greenskeeper, to 3, Eddie's Tavern, and Poe's Public House. When I went to the University of Virginia, started as a first year in 2000, Dabney 101. My roommate at the time was a waiter at the Greenskeeper on the UVA corner. My friend Connecticut Dave, my buddy Tom, the photographer, we would often go to the Greenskeeper and play foosball as first years while enjoying a cold beer, 2, 3, 8, 10, whatever it may be. The Greenskeeper was owned by a fantastic man named George and his wife. They lived in Louisa County. I often would see George sit at the bar and get absolutely hammered. Then drive home, unfortunately. Still, George ran an excellent bar, the Greenskeeper. Then this fantastic bar that was very much more locals than students, a bar that had a 7-foot bar box pool table in it, a bar that had a foosball table in it, a bar that was grungy and grimy and gritty. This bar sold to friend of the program, Andy McClure. Andy McClure is the proprietor and the local businessman behind Citizen Burger Bar, behind Bell and Belmont, behind the Biltmore, behind the Virginian. He's got a restaurant, Fine Dining, that he's a partner of in Richmond. He also has a second Citizen Burger Bar in Carytown. Andy McClure owns the building in Carytown where Citizen Burger Bar is hosted within. Andy took the Greenskeeper, he bought it from George, and he converted it into a more student-focused business called 3. 3 went from this gritty and grimy and grungy Greenskeeper to a business model focused on capturing the UVA student disposable income. 3 had some success. 3 also had some difficulties. as 3 became a nightclub after hours. And by nightclub, I use that phrase loosely, basically an epicenter for dancing, for getting after it, for just having a good time. 3, like many of the businesses that cater to a dancing nightlife crowd, had to struggle with folks coming into the location that caused trouble. And you see this downtown in Charlottesville now, as you try to figure out how to manage a nightlife atmosphere. You put different strategies in place at the door. Some of those strategies involved hired security. Some of those strategies involve doormen. Some of those strategies involve dress codes. Sometimes those strategies are not well welcomed or received. Sometimes those strategies can have PR collateral damage. So as a student and as a guy who matured from first year, second year, third year, fourth year to living in Charlottesville, working for the Daily Progress, working for ESPN Radio, working for NBC 29, and then almost 15 years ago, nearly 15 years ago, launching the businesses that I own today, I watched as the Greenskeeper evolved into 3, as 3 evolved into Eddie's Tavern, as Eddie's Tavern evolved into Poe's Public House. Maybe it was Poe's Public House and then Eddie's Tavern. In fact, I think it was Poe's Public House first and then Eddie's Tavern next. Poe's Public House ran into some trademarking issues with the name Poe's Public House. I believe there's one in North Carolina that forced the former proprietor of Poe's to change or rebrand his business to Eddie's Tavern. I watched as this location, centrally located on the UVA corner, struggled for an identity, struggled to continue capturing UVA student disposable income. The overhead, the rents on the University of Virginia corner, it's no secret, they are astronomical. The corner, in large part, is owned by 3 people. Tip Top Terry owns a good portion of the corner. Hunter Craig owns a good portion of the corner. And Litza Lambrinos, I'm sorry, I always mess up your last name. I apologize. She also owns a good portion of the corner. 3 people have cornered the corner market. And when 3 people own such a lion's share of such a valuable shopping and dining district, undoubtedly the byproduct is skyrocketing, escalating rents. And that's what we have today. And as a result, institutions and icons like Little John's have gone out of business. Institutions and icons like Michael's Bistro have gone out of business. Institutions and icons like the College Inn have gone out of business. Now, in 2022, you look at the corner and you see big box brands. It frankly is a shadow of the UVA corner I knew, I patronized, I enjoyed, I stumbled around from 2000 to 2004 and beyond. The breaking news I relay to you today, it's even tough to say. Raising Cane's, a corporate big box brand with more than 600 locations across the United States of America, is now in a permitting period, has a signed lease on the former Sheetz location, another big box brand. Frankly speaking, I think Raising Cane's is going to do a lot better on the UVA corner than Sheetz ever did. probably why the Sheets closed after such a short period of time. The unfortunate nature of this is the quality of life is undoubtedly impacted in a 10.2 square mile city that I love so dearly. I love so much that I've named one of my businesses after it. I Love CVille. Now a University of Virginia student who's a first year, who's a second year, who's a third year, who's a fourth year, who's a graduate student, has Chipotle replacing the College Inn, has Raising Cane's replacing the grungy and gritty, grimy greenskeeper. Chipotle and Raising Cane's, Starbucks, these big box brands are on the proverbial corner of every city in America. Today, they're on the corner of the heartbeat of a town we all love so dearly. Maybe this is the nature of capitalism. Maybe this is the nature of three people cornering the corner market. Maybe this is the invisible hand at work, a hand so powerful and so full of momentum, we can never stop. Either way, we can lament. We can wax nostalgic, and we can pass along to the current generation of UVA students what the University of Corner used to be. At one time, you could go into a bar called St. Martin's along the railroad tracks, a bar that had no windows. A bar called St. Martin's where Frank, the cashier from Little John's, was often belly up, drinking cold beer out of a silver pint glass that held his initials, hung above the bar. And when he walked in, everyone used to say hello to Bearded Frank as he bellied up to the bar. St. Martin's had its niche. Was it for all UVA students? No. Did you see a lot of locals in it? Yes. Would we patronize it? Me especially? Of course. St. Martin's is no more. When you were done drinking at the windowless St. Martin's, chatting with Frank, that cashier from Little John's, a cashier who used to give you change after you ordered your Samson sub, your ranch hand sub, your wild turkey sub, tossing the change from one hand to the other at the cash register, a show in and of itself. Frank at the register at Little John's. After you left St. Martin's, you could head up the street to Orbit's. Orbit's is now Boylan Heights. And Orbit's was this, how would you describe Orbit's? Orbit's, much like the greenskeeper, was gritty. It was grimy. It was grungy. You could find trouble in Orbit's. You could shoot pool in Orbit's. You can drink for cheap in Orbit's. If you wanted party favors, you could find them in Orbit's. Orbit's was a spot on the corner that had heart and chutzpah. Orbit's was a spot on the corner that welcomes students and locals alike. Orbit's today is Boylan Heights. You would be far-fetched. You would find it far-fetched to find a local in Boylan Heights during the school year. Boylan Heights has its place. From all accounts, it's doing quite well. But it's certainly, in the school year, not a spot that locals patronize. When I was in school, I'd go from St. Martin's, a windowless bar. I'd stumble to Orbit's, where I'd say hello to friends. One of them watching the show right now. James, remember those times we'd talk sports? You behind the bar, me belly up to the bar, and we'd chat University of Virginia and an athletic department that had so much promise and potential but left us brokenhearted. After leaving Orbitz and my conversation with James, I'd head down to the corner, and I would likely stop at a place called O'Neill's. O'Neill's is now Trinity Irish Pub. O'Neill's, much like Orbitz and St. Martin's, was a place where you would see locals and students within it. O'Neill's, much like the first two, didn't have the cleanest of corners, the cleanest of cubbies, but it was welcoming. The beer was cheap, the Bud Light, the Natural Light was cold, and the food, it was all under $8 in price. It was locally owned by a businessman that paid his bills by the cash that came through his restaurant that night. After having a Bud Light, a Natural Light at O'Neill's, I would slide down the UVA corner. I'd look into Little John's, and I'd say, after last call, when the bars close, I'm going to go into Little John's, I'm going to talk to Frank, the cashier, I'm going to watch him toss the change from one hand to the other after I give him $7 for a ranch hand or a wild turkey sub. But before I go see Frank at Little John's, I'm going to stop at the Virginian, a spot that's owned by Andy McClure, a University of Virginia graduate. Andy McClure is a friend of the show and all-around A-plus guy. The first restaurant Andy McClure ever purchased was the Virginian. He worked there as a student in undergrad at the University of Virginia. He held every role in the Virginian: bartender, waiter, busboy, back of the house, front of the house, took out the trash, cleaned the tables, swept the floors. He did them all while as a student at the University of Virginia. And Andy McClure is a brilliant man, a nuanced man, a man who studied finance at the University of Virginia. He left UVA, went to Manhattan, and worked on Wall Street. And after a short stint on Wall Street, Andy McClure said, "This is not for me. I'm going to come back to Charlottesville, and I'm going to buy a restaurant that I love, the Virginian." And he did just that. And when he purchased the Virginian, it did not go according to plan out of the gates. There were times, like all small business owners, where the owner of the company cannot pay himself. He pays his employees first. The employees always get paid before the owner. And Andy did that at the Virginian. He remembers times where he was so tired he would fall asleep in the booth at the Virginian, just to wake up the next day to do it all over again. But through some hard work, through some vision, through entrepreneurial spirit, through some hustle, through some chutzpah, through some grind, Andy McClure was able to take the Virginian, make it profitable, and it led him to buying other restaurants. The next one, the Biltmore in Ellwood Avenue Institution. I remember as a first year at the University of Virginia having the fake New Jersey ID, which my friends made in our dorm in Dabney as first years. I remember taking that fake New Jersey ID, heading to the security guy, the doorman at the Biltmore, and him looking at it, laughing, said, "This ain't gonna work here." But you know what he did? He gave it back to me because he knew it would work elsewhere. And you know what? I remember so many nights, there was a pretty female that was a third year, I was a first year, that I wanted to talk to. And she told me come visit her at the Biltmore. So I would climb in through the back window of the Biltmore just to spend some time with her. I'd get a pitcher of Natural Light If I had a little extra dollars in my pocket, I'd make it a Bud Light. I think on Tuesdays they were $2 at the time. And I'd walk into the Biltmore with this pitcher of natural light. If I had an extra buck or two, it was Bud Light. And I'd weave through the crowd looking for this pretty gal who was a third year. I'd find her, I'd pony up at the table next to her, and we would spend the rest of the night drinking natural light or Bud Light together. That was the Biltmore. If we chose to leave the Biltmore, we'd go across the street to Coupe de Ville's. We knew at the time, because I was a first year, that I couldn't get into Buddhist Biker Bar, because Buddhist Biker Bar at the time was even more difficult on IDs than the Biltmore. Coupe de Ville's was not, though. I'd go into Coupes with her. We'd eat $1 cheeseburger. We'd listen to Benny Dodd play on the back porch. We'd have a good time at a locally owned bar. And these are the memories I have of the University of Virginia, of nightlife, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, after college. It was a time when the UVA corner was still locally owned, and locally owned by people that you would see in the bars and restaurants that they actually owned. You could talk to George at the Greenskeeper. You would see Andy at the Virginian, or at 3, or at the Biltmore. You'd see the people that own Little John's. You'd see the guy behind Michael's Bistro, a bar that introduced me to craft beer for the first time ever. I learned about craft beer at Michael's Bistro, the restaurant above Little John's. We would stagger up those stairs, head into a place that was frankly for graduate students only. I'd get up to that bar, that copper bar, and I'd say, give me whatever you think I would like. I know nothing about beer except for Natural Light, Bud Light, and Bud Heavy. And the bartender at the time would say, here's a Pilsner, or here's something they call an Indian Pale Ale. Here's a Kolsch. Words I had never heard before. But one thing, if you know about me, I like cold drinks. And I certainly like cold beer. So I'd sit there and I'd be like, damn, this beer is $5, or it's $4, or it's $3.75. I can get an entire pitcher of Bud Light or Natural Light for $2 at the Biltmore. And the bartender would say, but does it taste like this? And I would try it. I'd sip it, and I'd savor it. And I'd realize, as a second and third year, that there were beverages out there that were significantly better than Natty Light and Bud Light. And that's when the corner was at its peak. Its heyday, where you could go from the Biltmore to Coop's, if you were of age, to Buddhist, the Virginian, to Greenskeeper, to O'Neill's, to Orbit's, to St. Martin's, and then finish it off with a sandwich at Little John's. Frank the cashier tossing the change from one hand to the other, while you waited for your wild turkey sub to be completed. You'd grab the styrofoam container the wild turkey sub was served within, and you'd follow the line of people from ordering to the cashier to the tables. Maybe you're with your friends, or you're with that third year beautiful girl, and you're devouring a sub before you head back to Dabney 101. Today, the rents on the corner have skyrocketed. And as a result of the overhead, the locally owned business, the entrepreneur with ties to Charlottesville and Central Virginia, is struggling to afford the escalating overhead. And as a result, Raising Cane's, Chipotle are replacing Greenskeeper, Post Public House, Eddie's Tavern, and the College Inn. The Little John's is gone. Michael's Bistro is no more. St. Martin's has disappeared. Starbucks is there. If we're not careful, the gentrification of locally owned businesses will continue. So I close my monologue and I head to our next topic of conversation by asking, begging, respectfully imploring you, the viewer and listener, to support the locally owned businesses on the corner and in our city more than ever before. Please, because if we don't do it, your sons, your daughters, my sons, the next generations of University of Virginia students will never know a corner like their parents did, like their grandparents did, and like their great-grandparents did. I don't want it to be the corner of every city in America. I want it to be the corner of Charlottesville, Virginia. All right, more topics to get to. And I hope you guys enjoy this talk show. I certainly enjoy connecting with you guys. Over the weekend, by now you know, a man was murdered inside a restaurant on the downtown mall. I talked about it yesterday. I played a video that was the top of a storefront on the downtown mall for you yesterday. That show is archived on ilovecville.com. After playing that video and talking about it, I don't know if you've noticed, but it's all over the legacy and traditional media now. Today I'm going to offer even more perspective on it. There's no question Charlottesville, this town that I love so much, has caught a lot of heat of late. And I'm going to characterize it from August 12, 2017 till now. August 12, 2017, Charlottesville, Virginia was in the global news. Still, Charlottesville's trying to recover from August 12th when Nazis invaded our town. When a criminal drove from Ohio to commit a terroristic attack, utilizing a Dodge Charger at full speeds to ramrod crowds on 2nd Street, leading to the death of a beautiful and vibrant young woman. It seems like we still haven't been able to find our identity or recover from A12-2017. We've struggled with them since then with terrible leadership at times in City Hall and on City Council. We've struggled with a former mayor who compared the city she represented through a graphic poem to rape and semen, literally. We've struggled with a rise in gang violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. We struggled with gunfights in the Omni Hotel parking lot, a shootout that is synonymous with the gunfight at the OK Corral. But instead of Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and cowboys, we had teenage boys shooting those guns. We've struggled with multiple police chiefs, Al Thomas, Dr. Rashal Brackney. Currently, the police chief is an interim chief, Chief Tito Durrett. We've struggled with Rashal Brackney suing the city of Charlottesville for wrongful termination, claiming she was fired because she was a black woman, instead of the performance issues that were prevalent, specifically the fact that most of the department refused to follow her lead. We've struggled in Charlottesville with city manager issues. How many city managers have we had in such a short period of time? Just off the top of my head, Mike Murphy, Dr. Terrion Richardson, Chip Boyles. Now we have a hired mercenary city manager and Michael Rogers, a consultant from the Robert Bob Group. We still don't have a full-time city manager. We've struggled with policing issues. 28%, 28% of the Charlottesville Police Department is currently vacant. 28%. There was a time in Charlottesville where city residents didn't even know the names of city council members. Now the city council members are local celebrities, and that's not always good. Their names are known for issues associated with leadership concerns. I guess what I'm trying to explain is we're struggling with brand identity in a community-first focus. If we don't get leadership stable, the collateral damage is the OK Corral in the parking lot of the Omni Hotel. The collateral damage is a man heading into a bar at 1 a.m. and unloading a clip, shooting dozens, I'm going to be accurate, shooting 12 plus bullets into a crowded bar. The type of violence that does not give the type of violence that could care less if witnesses see the murder. That's a scary level of violence. When a man is willing to go into a crowded bar and unload a clip, and this man could care less if people see his face. That's violence we hadn't seen in a long time in Charlottesville. We haven't seen that kind of mindset since James Fields rammed his Charger into a crowd of people on 2nd Street on the downtown mall. James Fields could care less if people saw him driving his Charger into a crowd of people. And on Sunday morning at approximately 1 a.m., right before last call, a man headed into a bar and he shot up the bar because he wanted to murder someone, and he could care less if people would witness the murder. That's terrifying. It should terrify you. That's what happened. To say gang violence has infiltrated Charlottesville is about as obvious as saying we need oxygen to stay alive. Charlottesville is not Mayberry anymore. And we need to be true to ourselves and realize that violence is prevalent, palpable, tangible, and no longer confined to certain pockets of the community. 2 weekends ago, a gunfight took place in the parking lot of a $400 a night hotel. Last weekend, a murder took place in a bar that serves $8 to $20 drinks. This is not violence contained to a couple of streets in the city anymore. So what do we do about it? How do we fix it? We're people of solutions. Where do we go from here? Well, let's look at it first from the City Hall vantage point. It's paramount that City Council and our mercenary city manager, Michael Rogers, a hired gun, it's paramount that we get the Charlottesville Police Department at capacity from an employment standpoint. 28% of the department is empty. Those were as of late September, not even a month ago. 33 out of 117 positions in the CPD are vacant. And I said yesterday, and it's important to emphasize, of the 117 spots within the Charlottesville Police Department, not all 117 are on patrol. Many of those spots are administrators or leadership or behind a desk or working the phones. So to say we have 117 positions, that's not to say we have 117 sets of boots on the street. So when 33 of the 117 spots are vacant, that is a direct correlation of boots on the street missing. There was a time when I was a student at the University of Virginia when I would walk around the corner, the UVA corner, and I would see Officer Dwayne Jones. He's now a lieutenant in the CPD. And Officer Dwayne Jones was on the corner beat. And Officer Dwayne Jones, a kind man, an imposing man, a large man, muscular man, a well-connected man, a man who knew the UVA corner beat when I was a student, 2000, 2004, so much so that he was able to go into the bars and restaurants on the corner and the staff would offer him water or come up and give him props, chat with him. A man so well revered and loved on the corner that students, including yours truly, would come up and chat with him, even if we had a couple drinks within our systems, because we knew Officer Dwayne Jones was not looking to ball bust. Instead, he was looking to preserve quality of life on his beat. He was talented, respected, imposing, kind, understanding, strategic, connected. We need that type of policing again. Certainly in densely populated areas that serve alcohol and are well populated after hours. We need the corner beat, the downtown beat, the midtown beat officer again. And for that to happen, we need to fund the police. We need to stop marginalizing our police officers. We need to stop disrespecting them. We need to make them feel welcomed. We have to figure out a way that they can own homes and live within the community they serve. That's not happening right now. And as a result, the Charlottesville Police Department is struggling to find people, talented individuals to work within the department. and say what you want. And I know this is going to be unpopular for some in Charlottesville, specifically socialist Charlottesville that loves to whine and complain on Twitter. If you have police officers on the beat around densely populated areas that are serving booze after hours, these police officers walking the beat like Officer Dwayne Jones did when I was a student at the University of Virginia, seeing the officers on the beat, the perception will sway criminal behavior. City Hall's got to figure out a way to get a full-time police chief in place immediately. It's been entirely too long, city councilors, and yes, I'm talking respectfully and directly to you, Mayor Lloyd Snook, Vice Mayor Juan Diego Wade, and councilors Michael Payne, Sina McGill, and Brian Pinkston. Why do we not have a police chief? Why do we not have a full-time city manager? This falls on your shoulders. And everything I just said is fair and comes from a place of respect, but certainly is a mindset of accountability. I also think from a downtown standpoint, you have a potential branding issue that's percolating here, a stigma, a perception. And the longer that downtown Charlottesville waits, and folks, you're talking or you're watching and you're listening and you're hearing someone that has tremendous skin in the game in downtown Charlottesville, someone who owns a large chunk of a building in downtown Charlottesville, someone that has a significant amount of tenants, renters in downtown Charlottesville. So for me to offer this perspective, this critical and straightforward perspective, please realize that this impacts me as well. Downtown Charlottesville, there's a branding issue that's percolating, a stigma, a perception, and that issue is one of unsafety. That issue is one of concern. And the longer we allow this branding issue to bubble, to percolate, to gain steam and momentum, the harder it will be to change. It's like a tanker that's in the water. That tanker doesn't change course quickly. It takes an extended period of time for the tanker in the water to alter its course. Do not allow this stigma that's bubbling to gain momentum. I literally do PR, brand management, perception, crisis management for a living, for 107 clients, many of them not even located in Central Virginia. Put a strategy in play. If you need help, there's no one that does this better than me within 60 miles of Charlottesville. Figure out an approach. And the approach is not having the chamber president talk about this on the news, or the president of the nonprofit, the executive director of the nonprofit, Friends of CVille, talking about it on the news. That's not a strategy. That is literally what we learned in Crisis Management 101. You learn that as a first year at UVA. That's not a strategy that's dynamic, or a strategy that is evolved or nuanced. The strategy should have multi-prongs, many levels, should be rolled out in phases. And frankly speaking, yesterday, did everyone notice the snowflakes, the lights that are hung by the lightning, the light posts around downtown Charlottesville to help commemorate or celebrate Christmas and the holidays? Well, guess what? They were hoisted yesterday and they were clamped to the light post around downtown Charlottesville. Do you think that's a coincidence? No, that's not a coincidence. That's some folks around City Hall saying, oh, let's get the snowflakes up real quick. to make it seem inviting to come to downtown Charlottesville. That is not a strategy. That is not a strategy. Talk to professionals. Talk to people who have skin in the game, who own businesses, who've named their companies after the downtown or the city itself and have a lion's share of an own building on the downtown corridor. Someone who spends hours every day championing the city. Snowflakes and 15-second sound bites for TV newscasts that no one watches are not strategies. From a community standpoint, what are the solutions? Well, here are the solutions. We have to invest in nonprofits at a greater clip than before. The Boys and Girls Club. Nonprofits like We Code. Nonprofits like Robert Gray's and Derek Rush's. The Love No Ego Foundation with Freddie Jackson. The Buck Squad. How much of an influence and impact would Juan Diego Wayne or Lloyd Snook or Brian Pinkston or Sina McGill or Michael Rogers or Tito Durrett or Bellamy Brown or yours truly have in talking with gang members? You want to know how much of an effect? That much. None. The folks that have the impact and the influence are the Robert Grays, the Derek Rushes, the Freddie Jacksons, the Fernando Garays. Leaders. Someone in a suit. Someone with a police shield. Someone with a gavel. Someone with a pocket square is not going to have influence. The community, we have to invest in our nonprofit stakeholders who are on the streets more than ever before. Because if we do not do that, this gang violence is going to gain traction. So here, I've given you multiple solutions on how we solve this problem. In conclusion, the solutions are as follow. Charlottesville City Council, good God, get a permanent city manager. Charlottesville City Council, good God, get a freaking police chief in play. City manager, police chief, and city council, good God, get the vacancy rate of 28% in the Charlottesville Police Department figured out immediately. Charlottesville Police Department, get the corner beat cop and the downtown beat cop and the midtown beat cop times 2 or 3 on the streets again with shoe leather as the form of policing, walking up and down the streets, showing a presence, doing what Officer Dwayne Jones used to do. Showing his face, being kind, talking with locals, making himself known in quiet ways. That's policing. Community members, invest in our nonprofits and invest in the ones that don't have vanity associated with your investment. How many folks have invested in nonprofits in this community because they want a seat on a board? How many people have invested in nonprofits in this community because they want a business relationship with somebody on the board? How many people have invested in nonprofits in this community because they want to say they invested in that nonprofit, knowing that investment will yield nothing besides an ego stroke? An ego stroke. So many people Instead, invest in the nonprofits that matter, the ones that are on the front lines. And I've given you 3 of them. The Love No Ego Foundation, the Central Virginia Boys and Girls Club, the Uru Foundation, and I'm sorry, Robert and Derek, if I'm messing up that first word, UHURU Foundation. Invest in these, because those are the ones that are having a freaking impact. We're at a crossroads of tremendous concern. Because when the violence, when murder goes from pockets of the community to the parking lot of a $400 a night hotel, or where murder goes into a bar where the guy with the gun murders somebody without caring what any witness sees, Jesus, that is freaking concerning. Those are solutions. I don't want to hear from anyone that we don't talk solutions on this talk show. I don't want to hear that ever again. Last item out of the notebook, and I'll bring this up in a larger capacity on tomorrow's show. Boyd Tinsley, the former band member of the Dave Matthews Band, a portion of his property is currently at auction. Do you have the photos? Let's put them on screen, please. Judah Wickhauer is our enterprising director. This is public knowledge. I'm not blowing up Boyd Tinsley's spot. In fact, this may even help him as this has gone to auction. Are you showing the tennis facility? They're on screen. Thank you. Look at the screen. Look at the screen. It's a 7,800 plus multi-use building right off of Old Lynchburg Road. He's had a fall from grace. And I certainly don't want to highlight anyone's fall from grace. The reason I'm bringing this up to you is because I want it in the news cycle. Maybe these properties can get sold and they can potentially help a man that is in a financial crisis right now. Has he done some things in the past that he regrets? Undoubtedly. Sketchy stuff, bad stuff, criminal stuff. I'll leave it up to you to decide. That's not my call to make. And I'll utilize the word allegedly. A lot of his property, some of his property is currently at auction. I'll talk more about this tomorrow. This is the I Love CVille Show on a Tuesday afternoon. This stuff weighs so heavy on me, so heavy on me. And it weighs so heavy on me as a father of a 4.5-year-old, as a husband, as a man who's downtown 7 days a week, as a man who has a second kid coming, as a man whose livelihood is tied to this community, and as a man who loves this community dearly. And I know there's so many of us out there that do. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. I'm Jerry Miller, and this is the I Love CVille Show.